welcome. My name is Arlene Hoffa. I'm the current chair of the Monterey County Chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. We pause to recognize that we gather here today on the traditional lands of the Esalen, Chicxulon, Mutsun, and Salinan people, and we thank them for their stewardship of the lands and the water. Today's event is to honor and recognize an outstanding member of our community, Mr. Dennis Marr. The award is, This award, the Ralph B. Atkinson Award for Civil Liberties, is named after Ralph B. Atkinson. He was born in Newbury, Massachusetts in 1907, and after he became an adult, he went to MIT and then to California Institute of Technology, where he studied chemical engineering. He then dedicated his early professional part of his life to color photography, so that he helped invent Kodachrome. We had that song, Kodachrome, and he won an Academy Award in 1939 for the first color film, the first movie in color. He then relocated from the Eastman Kodak on the East Coast to near Los Angeles, and after a few years he says, what am I doing with my life? And he sold his business and moved up to the Monterey area in 1959 and dedicated his life to civil liberties issues. He was a good friend of Linus Pauling, and he helped try to stop proliferation of weapons. In 1975, there was an emergency meeting of the ACLU, and he had a seizure disorder. He was told not to drive, and he did it anyway, and he died in a car accident on his way to San Francisco. And so we are here today because of Ralph and his great honor to our community, and now to recognize Dennis. We have several past recipients of the Ralph B. Atkinson Award. If you're able, would you please stand up? And Stephanie Taylor. Many of the other past awardees have passed away, and others have sent messages directly to me asking for forgiveness for not being here today. I would like to now turn it over to our Monterey County Registrar of Voters, Gina Martinez. She was asked specifically by Mr. Marr to be introducing him and giving the keynote address.
Thank you everyone. Good afternoon. I am Gina Martinez, Registrar of Voters for the County of Monterey, and I am just so honored to be here today to recognize Dennis Marr and his work towards civil liberties. And I want to start with, I was asked, and I was surprised, I was shocked, honored, completely happy to do this, but then when Dennis came in, I went to go offer my hand and congratulate him, and before I could say congratulations, he said, Gina, I want to touch on a bit of business with you. He's like, National Voter Registration Day is coming up in September, and I think we could do it better, and I agree 100%, and I know that with Dennis, we are going to do it better, so all of you folks, watch out, because I'm pretty sure he's going to sign you up to work on that project as well. So again, it is both an honor and a privilege to stand before you today to celebrate a remarkable individual, a person whose passion for helping others and deep commitment to civic engagement have left an indelible mark on our community. Today we gather to recognize Dennis Marr, a dedicated community member and a dear friend to so many of us. For more than 12 years, spanning 26 elections, Dennis has devoted his time and energy to the Monterey County Elections Department, offering invaluable support in the democratic process. His unwavering dedication to ensuring that every voice is heard has made him a cornerstone of our local elections. To put this into context and to highlight what Dennis means not just to the Monterey County Elections Office, but to me personally, Dennis has been a factor in over 2/3 of my entire career with elections. In that time, we have worked through extremism on all sides of the political spectrum, last-minute total decertification of voting systems. Dennis, I don't know if you remember that, but that was a lot of fun. through a governor calling a special primary election to occur just 2 weeks after a regular scheduled primary election. That was a lot of fun too. Dennis and I managed to work both. And to cities deciding to conduct their own election in which we both became observers, and that was a wonderful experience to observe with Dennis. We have worked through staff and administration changes, changes in voting systems, changes in election management systems, office locations, floods, fires, lockdowns, power outages, 3 presidential election cycles, 3 registrar of voters, 3 CAOs, that's our chief administrative officers, who also has a hand in elections, and 3 secretaries of state, and of course a pandemic. I can say confidently that this office would not have been as successful in working through these challenges, and I personally would not have been as successful if not for Dennis Marr. At a time when the public reads about the immense challenges election officials face during this unprecedented era of election administration, and I can attest to this, there are immense challenges, and it is an unprecedented era of election administration. And while at the same time we read reports of a related mass exodus of election officials across the state and across the country, I'm often put in the position to reflect on how I can make it through increasingly challenging times and go another election cycle. And when I do that, I look to the people around me for inspiration. During my most challenging hours, I'm inspired by those who show up election after election with unwavering dedication, with little fanfare or commotion. Those who show up simply because they believe they should, because it's their civic duty, because really it's their way of helping the community, and it's something that we all should be doing. And they ask for nothing in return. This is who inspires me and keeps me going election after election, even in my darkest and most challenging hours as an election official. And this is Dennis Marr. As a longtime member of the League of Women Voters, Dennis has consistently shown leadership and initiative. As a member of the League, Dennis has collaborated with the office in various ways. He has reached out to ensure he and the League of Women Voters understood what our mission was and how we were helping our voters. What was our outreach and education plan? How are we going to make things better? And he has offered both feedback for improvement and praise for what's working, all with the goal of ensuring the civil liberties of others are upheld to the highest standard possible. He balances holding others accountable with an infectious spirit of collaboration. In addition to working directly with the elections office in support of the democratic process, Dennis works outside of the elections office to create a space where voters can become more informed. Dennis organizes with the League of Women Voters candidate forums so that voters can have direct access to the people who wish to represent them. And these are very successful, and these candidate forums are very well attended, at least for those candidates who are willing, and for those candidates who may be a little bit reluctant but cannot hide from Dennis because he does wait for them. He finds out where they work and people go to their office and approach them there. Now, when I began my career in elections, I managed poll workers and polling places. And I was able to work with the League and with Dennis specifically in staffing locations. I'm going to invite a member of the elections team up who picked up the areas I moved around the office and has worked with Dennis closely over the years. I'm going to invite Ms. Mary Helen Gallegos. She is the elections program manager in charge of polling places and poll workers.
Thank you, Gina. When I heard Dennis was being honored with this award, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to join and share a few words about Dennis. Through the Team Up for Democracy program, Dennis has served as a liaison between the League and the Elections Office in adopting polling places. Dennis masterfully coordinated efforts to ensure smooth operations at each location, proving that no task is too big when it comes to serving his community. He's always willing to step in and step up, particularly when there's the need for poll workers in specific areas, never hesitating to lend a hand. There have been times where the task of coordinating the League was complete the polling places they adopted were full, and Dennis said, "I'm going to let them take it and step aside." Later, as we approached the election, I would find his name listed as a poll worker in an area of the county that's in need of poll workers, nowhere near where he lives. I have to take a moment just because I had to question that at first, but then I realized Dennis steps up and volunteered in a different location outside of what the league adopted because there was a need. His passion for democracy prompts him to be a liaison, even when he has handed off coordinating duties to someone else. He is consistent and makes sure everything is running smoothly. So much so that I've signed him up for 2026. We'll talk later, Dennis. Dennis's passion doesn't stop with adults. He's equally dedicated to inspiring the next generation. Through his work with the League, he is tirelessly educating and encouraging youth to appreciate the democratic process and the power of their vote. He has instilled in many young people the importance of participating in civic responsibility, leaving a legacy of engagement that will undoubtedly carry on for years to come. Gina?
Thank you, Mary Helen. So I do have, before I continue, one last message to share for Dennis from someone who's very special to both of us, and he insisted on saying a few words. I do want to preface this by saying that this man is now retired and just says whatever he wants to say, so he does not represent the office any longer, except for our love of Dennis.
Well, hello, Dennis. I'm coming to you from the road. This is my little home on the road, and I couldn't pass the opportunity to say something to celebrate this day, and I just every time I remember you, I remember those early days when you used to come to the office to ask questions about elections and this and that, and I used to call you Dennis the Menace. You had a genuine interest in elections, and you had questions that to satisfy all that curiosity that you always had. And in those years we used to have a lot of activists coming to the office asking questions. Some were a little loosely tethered to reality, but you weren't one of those. You were, logic about your thinking and respectful, and I always liked dealing with you because of that. In addition, I used to see you at the election conferences when you represented the League of Women Voters there, and it was always good to have that Monterey County representation in addition to us, so it was good to see you then in those days. But again, I cannot think of somebody more deserving of this award. Dennis, you have so many years of service, and I congratulate you. I cannot express my gratitude enough for what you have done for our community. So again, thank you and enjoy the day, and we'll see you someday. Well, hello, Dennis.
That's just like Claudio.
Little home on the road.
That's absolutely like Claudio. Just step in again. So, retired registrar of voters Claudio Valenzuela, we miss him, and he adores you, Dennis, and we loved working with you all these years. So, I do want to add, I believe in the saying, if you want something done, you should find the busiest person in the room and ask them to do it. It turns out, as we have learned over the years, that person is indeed Dennis Moore. We have always considered Dennis an essential part of the Monterey County elections team. We thought we were very special, and we thought that we kept him so busy that he would be ours. But it turns out we were wrong. In addition to serving in elections, he's an essential part of many other teams. He's also an active member of the League of Women Voters. He volunteers for other agencies, sits on committees. He doesn't even know how that happens. Sometimes he just goes there to volunteer and be told what to do, and suddenly now he's on the board. And that is because he's the busiest man, I think, in Monterey County. He also serves with the Point Star Lighthouse. He has a significant impact. He's had a significant impact for over 50 years to the libraries. From lifting boxes to raising funds, he truly embodies the understanding that every task is mission critical to serving the public. His service seamlessly and impactfully exists at the intersection of arts, information, and democracy, and promoting civil liberties for everyone. Whether it's serving on committees, assisting voters in need, assisting agencies in need, or providing his expertise to ensure the smooth functioning of our elections, Dennis's selflessness, dedication, and tireless efforts truly embody the spirit of community. Dennis, your commitment to service, your passion for democracy, and your heart for helping others are qualities that inspire us all. Thank you for everything you do to make our community stronger, more informed, and more connected. You are not just a volunteer, you are a true champion of democracy and civil liberties. On behalf of everyone whose lives you've touched, we thank you and honor you today. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the Monterey County Chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, I would like to present you with the 2025 Ralph B. Atkinson Award.
Wow. Annual meeting. And I thought that when I suggested Gina that she was going to talk about the future of elections in California, but I do have a comment about this this plaque. The only time on the board of the League of Women Voters that the board split by gender was 1 year. We were trying to think of a gift for an outgoing president. And somehow this other guy, Wolfgang Haas, and I were the subcommittee to do this. Now Wolfgang and I had both been in the Army, and so when we think of gift for outgoing president, we think plaque. And so we came back to the board and we said, you know, we'd like to create a nice plaque for her. And all of the women on the board thought that was a terrible idea because it was just one more thing to dust. And so Wolfgang and I looked at each other and we thought, dust? So all the women voted for flowers, Wolfgang and I voted for plaque, and flowers won overwhelmingly.
You can use it for a cutting board. You also have some other things to dust here. A certificate from Congressman Jimmy Panetta, recognizing your achievement.
Jimmy Panetta, we have a member of the league who is a Republican, but she said she had to vote for Jimmy Panetta because her son went to school with him. And one day Jimmy was over at their house, and her son was a very picky eater. And Jimmy says, Mrs. Hall, what are we having for dinner? And she said, oh, we're having artichokes. And he says, I love artichokes. And her son, you know, not to be outdone, said, oh, I like artichokes too. And Cynthia said, the man got my son to eat artichokes. I'm voting for him.
And one from John Laird. Do you have a story about John?
No, other than he's a great friend of the league and always gives us the time of day.
Excellent. And last but not least, Donna Addis, State Assembly.
Dawn, we've watched her entire career. She's working very hard to get name recognition up here. So we'll see where she goes. That's been the interesting thing about the league does these candidate interviews. And for example, Robert Rivas, we met when he had been elected, and we kind of watched him evolve. And it's one of the real inside things you can get if you become involved with the league. Well, I didn't realize that this was going to be so much about me that I got to hear all these wonderful things without dying. So, so thank you for the award. When Arlene called me, I said I would only accept this award as a stand-in for the people and organizations I've worked with, and not for some individual achievement. Everything I've done has required the presence of others. Now I understand that I got this award for my work with civic engagement and the promotion of libraries, so I'm going to talk about both. Before we begin though, if we've ever worked on a library project together, wave your hand and the other people can offer some applause. Okay, they're going to hold their hand. All right, so if we've ever worked on a voter service activity, candidate forum, state propositions, pros and cons, voter outreach, mock elections, staffing the polls, distributing the Easy Voter Guide, please wave and receive some. So, of course, while I'm telling Arlene that there must be more worthy candidates, my inner self was very pleased. I'm happy to add my name to the distinguished list of Ralph Atkinson award winners. In particular, on the list are two people I knew personally, Jerry Lo Sabato and Hebert Olson. Jerry Lo Sabato was a visionary. She got me to see things in a manner that I had never imagined. She was an inspiration because later in life, she became a self-taught community organizer. She mastered messaging, coalitions, outreach, branding. She always carried that red embroidered jacket with her in her car so that wherever she was, you could spot Jerry Lo Sabato. As a community activist, Hebert and I were more alike than we were compared to the trajectory of Jerry's. Hebert did what I always do, and actually what Wes always does, show up. There's a lot to be said for that. Hebert's video work was constant. He wasn't the easiest person to know, but we got along because we shared some personal characteristics like a certain over-earnestness. Everything I've done has depended on my association with great organizations and people who are part of them. For voting rights, it's been the League of Women Voters and the Monterey County Elections Department. With libraries, it's been numerous groups associated with the Pacific Grove Public Library and the California Library Association. I sometimes take calls from the public about voting. Once I was asked, what can my one vote do? I'm not sure how to answer that satisfactorily for this person because it's actually the wrong question. The right question is, how can I be heard? The answer is to organize. You have to gather your allies, you have to take the long view. The only other way I can reconcile what can one vote do is to draw on my Army experience. Now, I was about the most reluctant soldier you can imagine, but you learn a lot in the military. And one is the commitment of every member to all the other members. So if you have like a whole brigade, 6,000 people, you might think, well, what's one less rifleman? What is one less, can it affect the outcome if there's just one less person? No member of that unit would ever think that way because they are committed to the person on the left and the person on the right. Now that's just my own way of looking at why I think voting is so important. And I don't know how to get that across to other people, but that would be one of my answers about what can one person do. Now, I joined the League of Women Voters because I was interested in county government, and they seem to be the only group around studying county government. When I went to my first meeting, I was just astonished by reading all of the name badges. It appeared that the letters to the editor section of the Monterey Herald had come to life. So I've stayed with the League because its processes, studious and deliberate, really match my personality. The League does both policy and advocacy and the promotion of civic engagement. I've stuck with the civic engagement side, the voter service side. My spouse, Susan, once asked me what I thought about some particular water issue. And I said, I didn't know, but I was waiting for Janet Brennan to tell me what I thought. With the League, I plunged into voter services, candidate forums, speaking to voters about ballot propositions. The big challenge there is squeezing all those California propositions down into 1 hour. And as Marilyn Maxer knows, sometimes we hit that and sometimes we don't. We're working at the polls for 26 elections. Sounds impressive. No, there's no way I'm going to catch up with Eleanor and Kevin. So back there, they're you guys are over 50? Somewhere around there, yeah. They started when they were 21, I guess.
Younger than that.
Younger than that. For multiple decades, I've participated in these activities, and I've seen the League get better and better at it. We now can offer simultaneous Spanish translation at candidate forums if we need it. We've learned how to weather the COVID-19 conditions at the polls. We are comfortable with dealing with disgruntled voters. I still get nervous before all the candidate forums. Will all the candidates show up? Will an audience show up? Will they show up with questions? If you're doing a candidates forum for the airport board, it's kind of hard thinking of anything to ask. Will we get through this event without a blunder? Was there enough publicity? But other people have told me that's okay. That little nervousness keeps you on edge. Let's see, the structure of a League candidate forum is that it is not a debate, but an orderly way in which the candidates can present their ideas to the voters. Hard-hitting and lively? No, it's not that. Dull is a valid criticism, but if the audience leaves with an idea of who to vote for, then it is successful. I think it's important for the voters to hear their candidates and to be able to question them in person. The trickiest task is getting the candidates to agree to show up. Candidates usually don't want to be seen saying no to the league, so what they will do is they just ghost you. You know, they will duck invitations. Now, if a candidate won't answer telephone calls, emails, or the U.S. mail, I have been known to sit in their offices, waiting rooms, waiting for them to show up, and, you know, basically stalking them. I've also delivered personal notes to their homes, even if they live in Greenfield. I've gone to club meetings that I knew that they were going to show up at because you get fined if you don't come to your club meeting. So I've been pretty successful. Now the community should be grateful for the tremendous work of the Monterey County Elections Department, beginning with the Registrar of Voters, Gina Martinez and Mary Helen Gallegos, and going back through Claudio Valenzuela, who you saw there, and Linda Toulet. Their informal motto is small but mighty, and they do accomplish a lot. When it comes to elections, one unsung hero is Kevin Handstick, who's sitting right in there. Kevin is one of the principal trainers of the election clerks. Now, clerks have to go through a training before every election. So I've worked 26 elections. I've heard Kevin maybe 20 times and maybe Mary Helen 6 times. Well, anyways, Kevin has the unenviable task of making the election code interesting. However, he brings some professional acting skills to the table. He's also quick on his feet. Kevin had to announce a change in policy that banned the use of duct tape to attach anything to the walls of wherever your polling place was. So I raised my hand and said, well, what do you use to attach ducts to the wall? And Kevin waited a beat, and then he said, push pins. Now, sometimes I do get pushback about trying to recruit people for the polls, saying, oh, I don't want to go through another training. And I always point out that his wife, Eleanor, who's sitting there in the yellow, works every election and has to sit there listening to Kevin before every election. And I said, if she can do it, you can do it. Okay, so let's talk about libraries. The First Amendment guarantees freedom of speech, which let's expand it to freedom of expression. But the right to speak freely is meaningless unless there's somebody listening. There has to be a right to hear, to read, to learn, and that's where libraries come in. I got started, as Gina mentioned, as a library supporter, literally, in 1980 when a friend asked me to help lift boxes of books for the Pacific Grove Friends used book sale. From there, I served on every group associated with the library, the City Library Board when I lived in Pacific Grove, the Friends Board twice, the Library Foundation Board before it merged with the Friends Group, the Regional Library Advisory Board, and the Intellectual Freedom Committee of the California Library Association. I got my first experience talking to state legislators at the CLA Sacramento Lobbying Days, which they hold once a year. I'm glad I did go to those because there's a learning curve that you have to pick up on when you do lobbying. For example, I didn't realize that if you wanted to talk to Henry Mello, who was the former state senator from Watsonville, that you don't intercept him when he's on his way to the men's room. You wait until he's on the way back to the office. Just practical stuff like that. Now, advocating for libraries is not difficult. Nobody is against libraries. Maybe they don't want to pay for them. Maybe they have the misguided notion that everything is on the internet. Or maybe there's a few books that they don't want to see on the shelves. If you just look at the national headlines, though, you would think that libraries are under siege. I have a former college roommate who gets very agitated in this environment and is constantly sending me links to news articles about the latest attempt to ban books. I try to tell Bob to relax, because the libraries have a formidable weapon: librarians. If you challenge librarians over the freedom to read, eventually you're going to lose. When you go to the library school, you accept a code of ethics, which is summarized by the Library Bill of Rights. Library Bill of Rights is very much like the way I view librarians. Polite, somewhat radical people. In the decades that, and those resisting censorship are revered within the community. For example, the 1939 Kern County Library Director, Gretchen Knief, who fought against the Kern County supervisors who sought to ban, yes, that radical book, The Grapes of Wrath. In the decades that I have been observing public library librarians, my conclusion is that librarians are the only people in government who can look at the community as a whole and ask, what should be done to make the life better for our residents? And then have the resources, personnel, and planning capability of getting it done. In Los Angeles libraries, you can now apply for citizenship. At any public library, you can access the internet. Libraries are becoming more resilient. Libraries are becoming meeting places when the community is under stress. Soon, when a tree falls on a power line and all of Pacific Grove is blacked out, what are the chances of that? We are hoping, once it gets installed, that the lights at the library will still be on. Money is being set aside for an emergency generator so that it's not just the fire department, it's not just the police department, it's also the library that is essential and must remain operational. The only other time I ever got any applause on when I was talking to a library group was about when the internet first became popular, and people were concerned that this was going to do away with public libraries. And I said, there's a distinct difference between libraries and computer systems. And my former director, Doug Williams, there, can attest to this. I said, in libraries, no librarian would think of taking a book and just putting it on the shelf. But everything has to go through cataloging, it has to be accessible, it has to be retrievable. If you go on any complex computer system, I guarantee you, there's a piece of software that's used every day and nobody knows how it got there. So that's the difference between computers and libraries, and why libraries are never going to replace never going to be replaced by mechanical, even AI, let's say, or especially AI. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself, because I have this captive audience, because I've never connected my personal experience to the larger context of civil rights until quite recently. Jerry Lo Sabato had a lot to do with that. Now, I have, let's see, for those of you who are of various ethnicities, you will understand this. I've always been sure of my own identity, but how the surrounding community sees me has changed. When I was growing up, I went from being Chinese-American to just Chinese space American. At the time, the loss of a hyphen was a little bit startling. Then I went from Chinese American to Asian, and then I went to Asian American Pacific Islander. Until now, I'm considered a person of color. Well, I still think of myself as the same person, though. I grew up in, I was born in Ames, Iowa, which is a convenient answer to the question, where are you from? Of course, the next question is, no, where are you really from? And the answer is, all my grandparents emigrated from southern China to the New World about 1900. I've always been a little bit, chagrined that when you see all of the people I know who have emigrated from China, not one of them came to America for political or religious freedom, like the Pilgrims. No, we all came because this is where you could make money. I grew up in Sunnyvale, California, where I attended well-funded public schools. Contrary to today's demographics, I was often the only Asian, let alone Chinese person in my class. In my high school class at Sunnyvale High of 400, where now the demographic in Sunnyvale it's about 70% Asian, there were only 4 Japanese or Chinese students. I like to say that there were so few of us that nobody saw us as a minority group. We were just these odd little people. For a long time, I viewed the ACLU as a necessary irritant of civic life. The ACLU would defend people who had no voice. They would also defend people who I didn't think were worth defending. But when a card-carrying member of the ACLU began to be used as a pejorative, I decided I needed one of those cards. And I have been contributing ever since, especially since my good friend Helen Davis became president of the local chapter. I didn't realize until much later in my life how the civil rights issues had affected my family. I didn't realize that I was an anchor baby until a recent presidential administration railed against the concept of birthright citizenship. When I was born in Ames, my parents were graduate students. Their visas had expired. My father was of Chinese descent from Canada. My mother was of Chinese descent from Costa Rica. My father had a pending job with the Burpee Seed Company, and they provided an immigration attorney. The attorney argued that my parents were willing to leave the country, but I, at a few months old, was an American citizen and wanted to stay. At that time, 1946, that argument was okay, it's sufficient. And they ruled that my parents could stay to care for me. Even then, though, there were still more hoops to jump through. Their names had to be added to a private congressional bill permitting immigration to the United States outside of the Chinese quota. If you remember from your civics group or class, private bills just affect a single person or a single group of people. At the time, in 1946, only 100 people of Chinese heritage from anywhere in the world were allowed to legally immigrate to the United States each year. So rather than have to wait for that quota, my parents were let in around that quota. Another thing that happened in my life was that around 1950, my parents were not allowed to buy a house in a new Sunnyvale subdivision because they were Chinese. You know, you have to remember that there were all these covenants against selling property to black people, to Asian people. Now, this action was not illegal until the 1963 Rumford Fair Housing Act. Now, after being told this, that no homes were available, my father sent one of his Caucasian co-workers to the sales office. Amazingly, homes were available. And just to seal the deal, the co-worker said that he wanted to make sure that he didn't have to live around those kind of people. And the sales agent assured him that the subdivision would be free of those kind of people. As a child, I heard this family story and didn't think much of it because that's just the way things were. And thanks to groups like ACLU, that's no longer the way that things are. So, what are my long-term plans? I serve on the board of 4 community organizations. At some point, I hope to turn over these leadership operations to younger people. Of course, Doug Williams and Kathleen, who I think they will be okay if I said they're over 90, are still trying to turn over their leadership responsibilities. My goal is to remain in good physical health so that I can continue to greet people at the polls with, "Are you here to vote? Yes? Then welcome." Thank you very much for the Ralph Atkinson Award and this opportunity to speak to you.